Welcome everybody to Mystic Times. Thank you for being there. This is Rafa. Today I want to share this great conversation that I had recently with Niish, where we explored spirituality, we explored our connection to God, we went into these ideas of the dream realm and what role they play in our lives. I mean, we have a great conversation ahead of us. You can find the second hour if you're interested in Niish's Patreon, and most likely by the time you listen to this, I will have already set up my own Patreon. So you can find all the relevant links in the description below. And well, have a great time. See you on the other side. Bye.
All right, here we are with another chat and an interesting person that has come to my attention. His name is Rafa Martinelli, and we met officially on Instagram, and we started chatting and decided to do a show. So here we are, and with that, I'm going to bring on Rafa and have Rafa introduce himself. So welcome, Rafa.
Hello, Niish. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm fine too. Really excited and happy to have a conversation in this way with you for the first time. But we've had some back and forth in the Instagram, like you said, and yeah, I feel we have a lot in common, or
yes,
or certain things that resonate between us. So I'm happy to see where this goes.
Yes, me too. I love interesting people, and you certainly qualify. You were in Uruguay.
Correct.
And I'm out here in Washington State, so I love it. This is one of the beautiful things about modern technology, is that people can be anywhere on the planet almost and have a line of conversation, have communication and connection, and we get to learn more by connecting in that way. And before the internet, those of us that were alternative in different ways, we only had our local groups or when we would travel. So this has changed the world. Right now is an example of the great side of tech. We are able to speak from such a distance.
I think so too. For me, it's been so wonderful. Even going back a few years, I started connecting with podcasts, and like for starters, it was like the Joe Rogan podcast, and I remember also Duncan Trussell. Those kind of things were like my entry point for all of this world, and to be doing one right now for me is like so amazing, because those podcasts in particular, regardless of where the evolution of those podcasts went. Those for me were a great company during a time of great of my dark night of the soul, as I call it, and I felt that there were other people like myself. I felt very, very alone without that, and once I found that, and also through, I remember the psychedelic salon, I learned about Terence Mckenna. And
yes.
I started listening to him, and it was like, wow, he's saying things that I already know, but I never had the words to express.
Terence is amazing, or, the late Terence was amazing and brought so much needed information to the collective. Also brought the idea of dosing with the sacred mushroom, especially, into a new light. Before that, it seemed like the majority of people were just doing that kind of shamanic experience, really. Mind opening, mind accelerating, mind expanding type experiences. But a lot of times they were in the context of partying. And so Terence really started to bring forth a deeper narrative that we could use them the sacred mushroom as a vehicle to look deeper into the process we're going through in this experience of life.
Definitely. I haven't tried mushrooms myself, but just his descriptions and the ideas of heroic doses, of 5 dried grams,
Yes.
silent darkness, like it says. But then even with time, I found this guy called Kilindi Igi, who I think passed away a couple of years ago, or maybe last year. And he was doing like 30 grams or something insane like that.
Oh my God. See, this with psychedelics, I have this control issue with myself. And I think this is what's kept me from never being an addict with anything that makes me lose control as far as let go of the egoic self in the realm. And psychedelics are one of those things you don't know what a bad trip is until you have one. And there's a lot of talk about what makes up a bad trip, your state of mind and all this. However, those experiences, the bad trips I had, always inspired me to dial it back. So these heroic doses almost scare me at a core level.
To me, they are super inspiring, or like they awaken my curiosity so much. Like, wow, if you can have like a regular powerful trip with half of that amount, just imagine what it would be with that much.
I agree. And I have done heroic doses of hallucinogenics in my time. And so not every time was a bad trip. And sometimes I think about, a lot of times it's about where we are in a mental space and even spiritual. And the times I had unfavorable experiences where I really just saw all the dark side of this experience, everything that was interconnected in the shadow realm became overwhelming when that's all you can see. And so for what I call a bad trip or an unfavorable trip, when that's all I could see was this inner stitching of heartache, pain, cannibalism, all the dark stuff that's out there that I'm not going to call bad because, as you know, everything is trying to live and be. And so I'm probably bad to a lot of things in the world that don't really, if I step on an ant, I'm definitely the bad guy. And that I'm not one of those people that avoid stepping on ants. I'm just saying it's perspective, and our perceptions of what it is we're seeking out of experiences really guide us. Perception is everything. And that's the beautiful thing about dosing with hallucinogenics is our perceptions change.
Personally, I think I kind of am the kind of person, now that you mentioned that, to avoid stepping on ants. And like if I find, for example, spiders at home, I put them in a glass jar. I was talking about this the other day with another guest in my show. I put like a spider in a glass jar in a jar, and I go outside and I drop it in some bushes or whatever. But yeah, of course, there's times where, for example, with the particular example of ants, I mean, there's so much all over the place that when you're walking on grass, unless you definitely see that there's an ant path or whatever it's called, you just walk and whatever happens. In the cases where I understand that I couldn't have stopped myself from, for example, stepping on an insect, I try to think about it and be like, well, that's definitely destiny for that insect. I mean, if it was impossible for me to know that I was going to step on it, it's like that was predestined.
Yes.
But I think, and I've always thought since I was very small, and I want to ask you something else about what you said of your trips, but since I was very small, I always had this inner knowing or inner intuition that when you ask about destiny or free will, from a very, very young age, I always thought that either thing was incomplete. I've always seen it as kind of a combination of both things. Like there is free will, but there is also destiny, and you're like writing your destiny as you go. But at the same time, it's already written that you were going to write it, or something like a kind of a paradox.
Yes.
And sorry, to one more thing, you mentioned in your trips, in the bad trips, which I'm not very experienced in bad trips either, because I've had a few challenging trips, where I felt very, very fortunate that I've had a sort of presence during the moment in which I was able to like separate my perception from whatever was happening during the time, my experience in that particular moment, and I've been able to like look at the situation kind of from outside and not fall into a desperation, but like being aware. Okay, so you've taken a drug or a substance, and this is going to pass. This is not going to last more than X amount of hours. So with that certainty, I've always been able to like ride the intense waves of challenging moments during trips. And in your challenging trips, you mentioned cannibalism. Could you express more about that?
Let me wind back and just wrap up the ant thing. I have the same pact with spiders and animals. I respect all life. I used ants because they are ubiquitous. But with spiders in my house, there are several varieties of poisonous spiders in my area. And I love all those that make nests and webs and they stay in them. But we have a variety here called the hobo spider. And they wander. That's why they're called hobo spiders, but they're very poisonous and they're everywhere here. So I tend to always try to get them outside. But if it's a situation where that's not going to happen, I will dispatch them. And I think, well, there's a policy here, a psychic policy in my space that you can look in my cupboards. I have black widows in the corners of almost all my cupboards. They stay in their webs, and I love them in the cupboards because they eat the pantry moths. And so they're doing a service. We have an agreement, but they don't wander. So the general rule here with stuff like that is if it's wandering in spaces where I'm going to be, like in my bed, I pull back, I get into the covers without looking and there's a hobo spider, not a good thing. And in reflexes, if I kill something that's on my face. So I've woken up with one on my face once, and the reflex actually is how I knew, because my reflex slapped it, something was on my face, and then when I realized it was a 2-inch hobo spider, I was like, oh my God. So I share that same policy, and a lot of people in my life have made fun of these kinds of things. Like, why would I care if I step on an ant or if I kill a spider? And I think that's a place people have to get to on their own.
Yeah.
And it's a personal thing, but I have always just felt interconnected to everything, including those things that can do me harm. It's a weird dynamic, isn't it? It's a strange thing. Survival is a high law, and then damage also. So, but I don't know what kind of poisonous things you have over there in Uruguay. I would imagine you have quite a bit.
I don't think there is many different species of very poisonous. There likely is, for sure. I mean, there's poisonous insects all over the world, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know many here, but in my case, I was speaking of more smaller spiders. I was just looking at an image of a hobo spider, and you said like a 2-inch. So that's
with their legs. Yeah,
I would be very scared of that.
They call them hobos because they wander and they're aggressive. They're not friendly.
Right.
So they're not as bad as scorpions I've lived around. Where scorpions, in scorpions, I can feel them when they're close by. And if your foot's on the floor, I've grown up around scorpions living in the South over here, where in the States, where you have to check your shoes. You have to definitely check the drains and your bedding. But they're aggressive too in a different way. And every time when I lived in New Mexico, anytime one would be on the floor, I could feel it. And they always seem to like want to go towards you. I don't know what that is, those little white ones in particular. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a whole different dynamic when it can do you harm. And I do still try to get them out. But if it comes to a situation, I'm going to kill it. Like that's, if it's going to get me, I'm going to get it first. But see, this is a bigger conversation, Rafa. Mm-hmm. This is a very big conversation, and it envelops the idea of food chain and dominion, which is in the Bible. And I've always taken a hard look at how the earth is considered, and this is all biblical language, right? Man's dominion. And so I get that on one level. And now with the deeper studies I've been doing, I understand that dominions are an angelic order, by the way. So it's actually an order of beings. Before I learned that, I thought it was really rude. Like, we are just lords of the realm, we're just by default, and nothing to be said about that. So I can just go around killing and doing what I want. I never could pull up to that, Rafa. And so I tried to research within my own memory archives. And some people want to call that stuff the Akashic record that includes your current life. I just call it my own archives. And when I tried to understand, where did I start getting this relationship that everything's connected? Because when I was little, it was very apparent to me that there's a chain event here with all things, including the elements. And the elementals, are also an order of beings straight out of the angelic order that reach back into all the other old indigenous religions as well. But I started to realize that I'm not, and I mean me by Homo sapiens sapien, am not the top of the food chain. And this is before I really started to understand that there are other things out there that we don't openly talk about. Beings that a lot of people don't talk about outside of our circles. And it just was one of those things I came in with. I understood this, and I knew that I am not the one reigning over this domain. In fact, if I don't have a gun or a weapon, a lion can eat me. An elephant can kill me. A lot of things can kill me that don't put me on the top of the food chain. And so as a little kid, I wrestled with that. Also, one of the things that was very apparent to me as a little kid was when I was eating meat. You know, the family ate meat. We had meat. Meat was around. And the day I figured out that I was eating muscle from an animal, and I looked at my thigh and I addressed that with the adults. I said, so that's this, right? Like my thigh, right? The thigh muscle. And they're like, well, it is, but it isn't. And I couldn't understand that, but it isn't. It's the same. It's a thigh muscle, right? I'm eating a thigh from a chicken. What's the difference? This is my thigh muscle. And I could never really understand why it was that there was such a distinction between humans and other animals as far as what we eat. And this included, you know, some of the Asian countries that like to eat cats and dogs. It's normal in those places. Just like in here in America, people eat pig and cow and chicken and all kinds of things. So we just don't eat cats and dogs here, at least in the open. And I could never understand this, Rafa. I've never been so ingrained in my own life that I've been able to set myself higher on anything when we're talking about in terms of the realm. And this is where I'm going to tie in my bad experiences, the few, with psychotropics. So the cannibalism, which is exactly what led into this, is something very interesting. I've been looking around at cultures that are well known for cannibalizing. A lot of indigenous cultures have done this in the past. There's a lot of stigma involved. And I see that there are entities, beings in the realm that have different names, go by different names, but all the characteristics are the same no matter what name they are. So we can identify something. Some people may call something a reptilian. Others may call it some sort of like a seraphim angel or let's see, the cherubim. Those are the ones that are very kind of reptile-like as well. And when you dose heavily, when you do a heroic dose, everything breaks down. The nature of reality is malleable. It changes. And the ego always, when you're conscious, when you're lucid, struggles to maintain control. So by heroic doses, the ego is just put aside. It's just like you are coat checked right now. And that's where a lot of people can panic with that, but you do. For me, I've always had like a non-local experience with them. But the thing is, when I was honing in on and seeing this cannibalistic behavior, what I was seeing was dark beings, so like shadowy entities, jumping into people and causing them to, or not causing, using them as a vessel to their ends, to their means, whatever they wanted to do. I was seeing that when I was dosing, and that started to cause the bad trip, because I started to, in that state where the gates of perception are open, see those kinds of things happening. And then that triggered the people in my lives that would all of a sudden do crazy things, or people in my life that were not everything I thought they were. And I started to see that there's a connection here. Maybe they too have been used as vessels from these entities, whatever you want to call them, to do things. And that's been the core of my bad experiences. And where they led me was a sense of paranoia, of not trusting everyone, of not understanding the real world, because this experience we have is not the real world. This illusionary experience is there's so much fluff here. There's so much smoke and mirror involved in this whole situation that when you do heroic doses of something, all that falls away. And what you see is a very different world. And so that can lead to paranoia. And that's where I do not like paranoia. I tap out. I do not like paranoia, Rafa. I'm not a person that likes to deal with paranoia. And the problem is when you start dot connecting too much, it is part of the process, because your worldview is changing, because you're seeing things you hadn't seen before. I hope that explains.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see what you mean of the like. So this goes deep, but the idea of other entities and other aspects of consciousness being so different to the human. Like sometimes I think about how different of an experience those different types of entities might have. Entities that, for example, perhaps they don't have a physical body. So how is it that they do exist, or how is their life or their daily experience, to put it some way? And I understand that it is possible for some entities to in order to interact with matter, and because likely they get something from the material experience in some way that fits them, that enriches their experience in some kind of way, and I've even had experiences with psychedelics where I've seen. I mean, in my case, it was a very positive experience. Again, I'm very lucky in that way. But I've had this experience where I was like shutting down. I was just sitting and under the influence of it was during an ayahuasca ceremony. So I was sitting down with my eyes open, but in the dark. And for a moment, I started closing my eyes and going inward. And I felt like my body shutting down, like turning off, or like the dimmer in a light switch, like starting to like shut off. And when that happened, my consciousness went, or my awareness, my perception went for like backwards, or I would call it backwards. Like, how in a game you can see the character from first person perspective or third person.
Yes.
So I kind of felt like my consciousness going to third person. Maybe it would be kind of like another body experience, but going to third person, and then something beyond that is probably, I don't know, interdimensional, or I don't know what we would call it. And when I sensed that, I went to or I was perceiving these entities that they were all dancing together, like in a very playful way. At the same time, they felt very powerful, or like, for example, their bodies were galaxies. So they were like, I call them cosmic beings, because they were like, if you could think of it like the shape or the outline of a human body with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but on the inside it was all like stars and galaxies and very cosmic. So these entities were like dancing together, and they felt also another like concept that came to me at the moment was like that they were like puppeteers or puppet masters. And it was incredible that the experience I had was like going backwards into that kind of perception and seeing them dancing together. And this felt like, oh, so this is how life happens. It's like these entities are dancing, and in 3D, the perception is of a human life and interaction with other people, but also at some point in the experience, one of the entities came into my body, and I felt it coming in like if you were to put like your hand inside a glove, and it's I get like very, very emotional with this story, because it didn't feel like something foreign, it felt like very much myself. So this entity would go into my body and animate it. So if first I felt it like shutting down, when this entity came in, it felt like life came back online. So in a way, it's like these entities are life force, or they channel life force into bodies by going into them, and then it would go out again, and I would be again watching them from the outside. And it did this like a few times, like showing me, this is how you exist or something. But then the next step of this was that I was able to realize, wait a moment, I'm looking at them. So I was able to like recognize that even though they felt like, or this one in particular felt like it was my soul or something of the sort, at the same time I was able to see it as another. So I could recognize that my consciousness was even bigger than this cosmic entity, which was like a very powerful, recognition.
It sounds incredible. So when you came out of it, and after those waves of processing the information that are just so beautiful. So here, where you are now, what do you actually think those beings are?
Well, in a way, this is something that I've been wrestling very much with to put into into our such basic way of understanding and communicating, language, spoken language, and the word as a tool to express stuff that is outside of words is very, very basic in a sense. So trying to put it in words is very hard for me. But
yes,
they felt on the one hand, they felt like something other, but on the other hand, they also felt like me. And this is this kind of duality that recently I've been kind of finding more ways to express, that I think we are living. It's probably several, but as far as my understanding right now, we are living two lives at the same time, or our self has two sides, perhaps, or two perspectives, and one of them, it's maybe like they are our subconscious, or how there's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And if you think about that concept, the subconscious mind would be everything that is outside of what we can be conscious of. So the subconscious, we could say, includes everything outside the most basic 3D experience. And so these entities, I feel like they are ourselves, but in a more expanded kind of definition of who we are. We tend to think of ourselves as first like, okay, I'm the body. Then we think, oh no, I'm the mind, I'm the emotions. And if you think about that, we're like naming the different bodies, that have been described in ancient times. I follow very much the ideas of Vedanta, and a lot of Buddhism too, and they describe all the different the layers of the body and the different bodies. And so I think they are like in somewhere in that continuum, which eventually reaches unity or source and undifferentiated, everythingness. So they are like some step along that gradient, and because they are not in the same part of the gradient as the awareness of the body and the mind, when we see them, when we experience them, they are experienced as other, because that is the only way that a human physical entity or person, can experience these kinds of things, is as an other. But at the same time, since they are part of this, since we are all one, and the expressions of the universe are infinite, they are also ourselves. And so we are, how to put it? So in summary, they are us, but at the same time they are other, because they have a sort of independent existence, or to put it another way, I'm starting to get this idea that what we could call I is actually like a point of focus in a way, and this focus can travel across that kind of gradient that I mentioned, and this focus can be on any part of that spectrum also. And when the focus is located in let's say in the human, in Rafa, it perceives whatever that part of the spectrum allows it, let's say, to perceive. But through psychedelics or through so many other means like meditation or prayer or magic or etc., through many different kinds of experiences, I'm understanding that we can become aware of the focus somewhere else in that spectrum and bring that memory or information back to the human part of the spectrum. And can you know what I mean?
I do. I think you actually did a fantastic job describing that. And there's a lot to be said within that whole universe you just gave witness to and glimpses of. There are teachings out there that everything that is the othered in the world that you experience, a lot of the unseen stuff, is actually you, and everything else is not you. And then there's also kind of attached to that same teaching, if you can experience it, it's not you. And that touches into this non-being self. And I think this is a good place now that everyone, the whistles are wet here and we have a sense of connection and all that, for you to give us a little background on who you are. What's your basic bio, Rafa?
Yeah, this was really cool to have this opportunity to explore these ideas, which have been like germinating and growing in my mind, but I haven't had I haven't given myself like the space to go deeper. So thanks for being here and being part of this.
We're just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking like, wow, we just went like super deep and I don't know, like half an hour or something. So to just give an overview of my story, I'm a musician. I also started a podcast around a year or so ago, a year and a half maybe. I also work through music. You know, I used to play in rock bands since I was like 15 or so. I learned guitar, was my first instrument. And I've been playing in rock bands with friends and such. But slowly, something within me I can see now was growing, of a kind of something that nowadays I call, I think is kind of one of the main things that is affecting all of us, but which I was recognizing in myself back then, which is a kind of longing for God. And so I was starting to recognize that in music or in playing rock and in being like that character of the rock star or something like that, which I was like, I was so young. I mean, I wasn't like a famous musician or anything that you could, but I know when you're young, you know, you think so much of yourself that is like not really what's going on, but you're like in a kind of story that you're telling yourself. So through music and rock, I was finding some kind of, or looking actually for some kind of fulfillment of this longing for God. And slowly I started recognizing that what I was looking for was bigger than what I was doing at the time. So the part of playing in rock bands and stuff started feeling so small and so insignificant, and not insignificant in like a regret of having done it, because I love the path that I've walked in life, but it started feeling like, okay, there's a next stage for me in this looking, in this finding and searching for God, which I didn't use those words back then, right? But the music, so it started feeling limited, and so I started exploring. I stopped playing in rock bands and started exploring different kinds of music. But then at the same time, during that period when I started realizing this, I met what I could call my, I spoke about this with Emily, but I would call him my spiritual master, because in Spanish, teacher and master is the same word. So Emily explained that it sounds better if you say like your spiritual teacher. So I met my spiritual teacher, who is a Chinese medicine doctor and an engineer.
Oh, that's amazing.
He showed me that, or what one of the main takeaways that I get from having met him and and living with him and traveling with him, he showed me that there are more awakened beings in the world today, right now. You know, we read about the Buddha or other kinds of awakened beings, and it sounds kind of like fiction, and or if it's true, you say, okay, or Jesus or as such, but you think, okay, this was like thousands of years ago. But just to have a glimpse of a person that, I mean, I wouldn't know if he's like enlightened in the same way as Buddha or whatever, but I saw that he was like far ahead of me in awareness, you know, and so he showed me that there was this expansion possible in my own development, and that I had so much more to learn. I learned from him this thing. It was kind of very eye-opening for me, is what I'm trying to say, to experience a person like that, and not only just being with him and seeing how he interacted with the world around him, but also the way that I met him was very synchronistic and very magical. And at the same time, when meeting him, I met the love of my life, with whom I'm still together to this day.
I love that. It's like such a powerful thing right there, just the connections.
Yeah, because I was like I was speaking at the start, I was going at that moment through the dark night of the soul. I was like 25 or so, and I was experiencing like so much sadness and this thing that I call longing for God. I was in this very deep, dark place, and I remember one night looking at the sky and asking God. I didn't believe in any kind of God. I wasn't like against anything, but I didn't have any confirmation for myself to allow myself to believe in anything. So I was like, okay, if there is a God, please help me. I need help. And like a few weeks later, I met him. I met my girlfriend. And we traveled together, the three of us. We traveled with him, and we were helping him in his journey, meeting different people, and we saw him meeting people through synchronicity. You know, I remember one time he said, like, we were staying at a hotel. And he said, okay, I gotta go to another hotel. You guys stay here, and tomorrow or in a couple of days, I will talk to you guys and tell you if you gotta come. And then we eventually he told us, okay, come. And when we went there, he had met this woman who was actually the daughter of the hotel owner, and she was going through a very tough mental breakdown. She had just been released from a psychiatric hospital where she was drugged with a cocktail, you know, of several different stuff, several different things, you know, like psychiatric drugs. And he helped her get better, you know, in like very few days. We started seeing an improvement in her. She was, at some point, it was incredible for us to see like how she was like not there in her body, you know, like the substances had created a kind of firewall that prevented her soul or her spirit to inhabit that body.
Yes.
And in just a few days, he was very good at Chinese medicine. So with basic stuff like acupuncture, you know, with your fingers, not with
the pressure points and the meridians. Yeah.
Working with that and just reminding her once and again of very basic things of how to be in the world, he was able to prepare like the soil for her body, for her soul to come back. And the change we saw in her, like she was very she was always like dressing in black and not taking care of herself, and her hair, her feet were all like bloody because of some shoes that she wore, and she was like totally numb. Not that there's anything wrong with dressing in black, but I mean, eventually we saw her one day that we remember for forever was when we met her after we were already about to leave or something. We met her and she had this what's the name? This turquoise? Is that how you say this color? Turquoise?
Yeah, turquoise.
Yeah, she had this huge turquoise handbag, and it was like a very important sign when we saw that, because she was always like completely in black, and suddenly she had this very different and very very bright color with her, which she had never used, and we saw, oh wow, this is like a sign that there's been some evolution in her, and we were very shocked by that. So as part of my journey, I don't want to extend too much, but that's something that was a very seminal moment for me, working traveling with him and my girlfriend, and then eventually coming back into society and trying to, like, it was a kind of psychedelic trip, to be with him, and the different experiences that happened while we were together, and coming back and integrating into society, into regular life again, was an interesting process. It wasn't very easy, because we came back to this. It's like all of us are asleep, and there's awakened people in the world, and when you get in contact with them, it's like they have their aura or their electromagnetic field around them automatically starts creating changes in those around them. So it's like a kind of magnet or something, and when they go, for example, in this hotel, the hotel was very, very dirty and wasn't being what do you say this like it was, yeah, let's just say it was dirty and not taken care of, and a few days after he got there, change starts happening. They fire people who are clearly like negative towards the guests, and who are not working correctly, and they started bringing new furniture and putting everything very clean, and it was all a few days after he arrived. It's like the energy that comes with him mobilizes the energy around him. You know how this idea of the law of attraction and the secret and all of this, how whatever you are is reflected from the universe. So if you have such a positive aura, physical changes will begin to happen around you to reflect the energy that's coming out of you, even if it has to interact with lower energies that could be around you. Like, it's like higher energies pull other energies that are lower up.
Yes, this is, he sounds incredible. And I really think that one of the secrets to this realm and this experience we're having is to follow the synchronistic rabbit. And a lot of times when I've done meditations into the idea of the looking glass, into the idea of the Alice mythos, and how the rabbit is always talking time. It's late, I've got a date, all this. And everyone associates it with time. I associate the rabbit with synchronicity. Synchronicity ties into time, certainly, because there's a quality that we understand as time. And when converging currents collide or cross paths, we're lucid and we're walking in as much lucidity as possible, their convergence of these energies creates a moment. And the moment can be what people describe or experience as a déjà vu or as a meaningful coincidence, which Jung termed synchronicity. And so the more we follow this rabbit, the deeper into this riddle we find ourselves, because this is the nature of awakening, of epiphany. It doesn't let up. It gets more intense, more clear, more crisp. The deeper in you get, the more you see how things are like a big mechanical, perfectly tuned and inlined mechanism that we are in and experiencing this bit of lucidity. And so for your spiritual master or spiritual teacher, however you want to look at it, I don't have a problem with the word master. I've called, and when I've studied Kung Fu and all that, we called Sifu's master as well. We called them the Sifu, the master. I don't have any backlash with that, but I do recognize why Emily would say that, because we're dealing with a lot of people that aren't understanding the depth of meaning in words and in context to the words around them. And so there's a breakdown of communication going on in the outer world, which we're all experiencing very clearly. So this is a beautiful introduction into you on your path and where you are. And just the fact that you meet this very significant person, and then through that, you meet the love of your life. I mean, this is all that checkpoints in time I always talk about. This is all right path. You're on it. You're awakening and you see it, and it's going deeper. And so we're at around an hour, and I cut these segments up into two parts. So at the ending, as we wrap this first hour up with this amazing introduction to you, Rafa, from what we started in the beginning to getting some bio here towards the end, that's going to lead into the very juicy next section. How do people find you in the world, Rafa? What's the name of your podcast? Give us all those details. Sure.
Thanks for this. It's been wonderful to share my story. As far as like the socials and the podcast is called Mystic Times. For right now, you can find it on YouTube. You can also search for my name, and you can also find me on Instagram and write to me if you like. You can find me in Atman Rafa. So Atman, like the idea of kind of like the oversoul in Hinduism, and
yes.
Rafa, my name.
Rafa Martinelli. What a pleasure this has been, and the second hour gets juicier. So I hope to have many more conversations with Rafa. It's in the works, some of it already. So with that, I want to thank the producers of the show, Christy Tesmer, Eric Peterson, Jason Lamson, Marcy Shapiro, Melanie Poe, Michael Wachter, Sana Rebecca, and Patrick Newland, that's out there somewhere, who, when he is on, baby, he's on. And so I think Patrick has some good stuff lined up for us. We'll find that out later. Thank you for coming to the Cosmic Salon and lounging with Rafa and I tonight. This has been a very challenging time, and it's been difficult for me to put stuff out here in the public because there's so much stuff going on and all of the censorship that's happening. So I've been doing a lot of stuff behind the gate at my Patreon, because that's where it's safest, and that's where I have to do this stuff, boots on the grounds and all kinds of other stuff we're doing, live streams back there. So if you are interested in any of that stuff, that's definitely the place to be. Other than that, remember, You are the dreamer. You are dreaming your dream. We are currently dream sharing with the collective, which is why this all sucks. Dream on, people. Dream another dream. Thank you.
All right, and we're back. I want to thank you guys for your time, for listening. I want to thank Niish for such an amazing conversation that we had together, for the opportunity of being on her show, and for doing this joint podcast. So once again, you can find the second hour in the description below. So have a nice day and namaste. Bye bye.